Links to previous episodes are given in the video description, so don't forget to like, subscribe and share the video. Mercy of the God of War. Episode 16. As soon as the green dragon landed, 3 people dismounted. Princess Sherian led the way, furiously charging inside the Diamond Palace and ignoring all the servants that had run out to greet them. After receiving the infuriating news at the Onyx Castle, she was seriously hoping that there was some sort of mistake. Mother? Mother! The Diamond Palace was awfully quiet, more so than usual. She had noticed little groups of soldiers stationed around the Diamond City on her flight there, but they were in such small numbers that it didn't seem important. However, now that she was actually inside the Diamond Palace, Sherian felt restless. What was going on here? She had only been absent for a few weeks. The journey to the North Camp was almost like a holiday trip for her. After she was done getting Karen's men back to work and up to her standards, Sherian had been almost bored. Truth was, Karen's army was well trained, enough to be able to function perfectly well with or without their commander present. There had been a few attacks from the northern barbarians, but it wasn't anything they couldn't handle. Sherian herself had taken part a few times, having more fun fighting alongside them rather than leading the men. She participated in a few debriefings, had listened to their reports, and made a few minor changes here and there, but really she was not particularly worried about the Northern Army. As it had been reported to the Imperial Palace, the Northern barbarians had been attacking more frequently than usual, but it wasn't as bad as what had been described. She was even shocked at how easy it had been to get rid of them. After a few days on the battlefield, she'd had enough. The general also made sure to have her visit the mountain hospital that had been Cassandra's doing. Sherian wasn't too surprised to hear them praising the Lady of the Mountain endlessly, but she was surely impressed with her legacy there. Her protocols would certainly be worth implementing in all the Dragon Empire's armies in the future. After all of that, Sherian had decided to return to the Onyx Castle. After having spent so much of her time in the Imperial Palace, she found the place to be incredibly boring. The Onyx Castle felt like a forgotten remnant of their empire, with nothing to do and nothing to see. Sure, she had found a servant who was fun enough to play with for a while, but her mother's letters had put an end to that fun time. Imperial concubine Sheren wasn't one to ask for anyone's help, or the type to worry over small things, which is why Sherian had been truly alarmed by her mother's letters. Once she told Anur, her younger brother had become restless too. The last one she read before leaving had been telling her about her mother's spies going missing one by one, and that no more news was coming in from the Eastern Front. Although Sherian wouldn't have been too worried about Karen ignoring their mother under normal circumstances, it was highly unlikely that he would ignore his concubine. Cassandra was quickly approaching her delivery date, and Sherian had witnessed how much Karen loved her. If he hadn't come back yet, it meant he wasn't done fighting, and if a war led by her brother, the Empire's war god, still wasn't done, something was indeed wrong. Hence, Sherian had grabbed Anur and Rune and raced back to the Diamond Palace. She had also decided to bring that uptight old guy with them. The poor Imperial servant had been left outside to puke after his first flight, but she could worry about him later. Mother! Sherian! Finally hearing her mother's voice, the princess let out a long sigh of relief and quickly picked up her pace. The imperial concubine was in one of the gardens with her arms crossed tightly over her chest. Sitting like a queen on one of the chairs with a young maid at her feet, she had been still as a stone until her daughter appeared. The little dragon, Sri, was also curled up at her feet, and continuously growling at the unwelcome woman before them. "You have got to be kidding me," growled Sherian, unsheathing her sword. Of all the people she had not expected to see, Fitra was at the top of that list. However, the princess was seated in front of Lady Sheren, flanked by no less than 6 soldiers. She no longer displayed any of the injuries that Sherian fondly remembered and was strutting around in her purple dress like she owned the place. Meanwhile, the imperial concubine was flanked by 2 soldiers and neither of the men belonged to the Diamond Palace's militia either. Sherian immediately recognized the color of Vrihan's militia with their red armor. From an outsider's perspective, it may have seemed like the 2 women were hanging out in that garden with heavy security, but the atmosphere was as cold as ice. Fitra seemed to be in control, and had an arrogant sneer on her face. However, as soon as her eyes fell on Sherian, it disappeared in a flash and she turned white, visibly terrified. "Why? You? What are you doing here?" "That's my line, you crazy," retorted Sherian, heading straight in her direction. "Do not take another step, Princess Sherian," warned one of the soldiers, taking out his sword and walking up to her. "We have orders too." Sherian grabbed him by his hair and brutally slammed the man's face against her knee. It probably wouldn't have made such an atrocious sound if she wasn't wearing metal knee pads, but alas! The man fell at her feet, his face completely wrecked. Upon seeing that, all the others remained in a religious silence, not daring to risk the same fate. "Finally," said Sheren, standing up. "Why did it take you so long to get here?" "What is going on, mother?" asked Sherian, still glaring at a petrified Fitra. "Can't you tell? I'm a hostage. In my own palace, too." Sherian raised an eyebrow, turning to her mother. There were a lot of adjectives that could be used to describe Lady Sheren, but not something even remotely close to a victim's status. She would never have thought to hear her mother call herself a hostage, actually. That woman was probably the most influential woman in the empire, if not the most powerful. However, glancing towards the horrified Fitra, Sherian already had a rough idea of what was going on. "Where's Cassandra? And the girls?" Lady Sheren quickly explained everything as Anur arrived in the room just in time to hear it all as well. The imperial concubine detailed Vrihan's arrival in her city, and how he had barged into the Diamond Palace with his men and seized control. Sheren had spent several hours that night agonizing over Cassandra's crazy jump down the waterfall, before one of the servants interrupted to let her know of news from some of her people in the Diamond City. Not only did they confirm that the concubine and her sister were alive and well, but also that she was being hidden by them and was about to give birth. After that, Vrihan had spent 2 nights and 2 days in an absolute rage, looking for Cassandra everywhere and sending his men left and right to interrogate the local people to find her. They had found clues indicating that the young concubine was headed north and, fearing Sherian's arrival, had left in a hurry, leaving only a few of his men and Fitra there. Sherian and Anur were both in shock over what had happened in such a short time. Not only had there been no news from the capital or the Eastern Front in weeks, but Vrihan had come to wreak havoc. What was father thinking? asked Sherian. He is surely not stupid enough to send Vrihan here. I don't think so, either, replied her mother, glaring at Fitra. However, that little rat did come here and claim he was acting on behalf of the Emperor to arrest Cassandra. She had no choice but to flee. Do you think Sephir is really dead? It seems so. The official news arrived here early the next day and your father placed the entire empire in mourning for the first prince. Sherian shook her head. The official news had been validated by the palace, so this couldn't be Vrihan lying. However, she didn't believe for 1 second that Cassandra had anything to do with his murder. She turned to Fitra with rage and determination in her eyes. Where is that little rat now? He left yesterday. His annoying soldiers searched the entire city to find Cassandra, but they couldn't. Apparently, his original plan was to lock down my city and use me as a hostage, but when he found out I had already sent a letter to have you come back before he had managed to kill all my couriers, he panicked and left like the coward he is. I see he left some trash behind, growled Sherian. Fitra was absolutely frozen, and terrified. Oh, she is supposed to be watching the hostage. Karine jested before rolling her eyes. Needless to say, it has been incredibly boring. Your brother is the most horrendous to have ever lived, Sherian sneered, slowly walking towards Fitra. Not only does he dare to barge in here, to try and harm my brother's concubine while he's gone, but then you have the audacity to use my mother as a hostage. Don't touch me, screeched Fitra, retreating in utter fear. Even the men who were supposed to guard her stepped back in cowardice as Sherian came closer. No one wanted to be next to have their facial bones violently smashed by the furious princess's knee. Fitra was left alone to face her, and she couldn't even hide her fear. Why? You can't touch me. The Emperor ordered you not to kill me. If I remember it correctly, Father's exact words were, not while we're eating, and not in the middle of the imperial chamber. Too bad for you, this is neither of those times or places, hissed Sherian, slowly raising her sword. Stop! Stop! You can't kill me. I know Vrihan's secrets. I'll tell you everything. Sherian hesitated, tilting her head. The truth was, she had been dying to get rid of this vermin for a while, and even Karen's cruel punishment of her hadn't been nearly enough in her eyes. It was almost too infuriating to see Fitra already walking again so soon. However, this wasn't a normal situation. Mother, what do you say? I say I want my family back, yelled the imperial concubine, exasperated. This duo of siblings got rid of all of my soldiers and chased Cassandra away while locking me in here. If Cassandra, her sister, and my grandson aren't all alive, unharmed, and well when we find them, I swear I'm going to peel every layer of her skin off and break every single one of her bones myself. Oh, good idea, Mother. We can get started on that right now, said Sherian with a sadistic smile. You break one of her legs. The soldier she had pointed her sword at became livid. Fitra was his master's sister, and when the second prince had gone, he told them to protect her or at least make sure she didn't end up dead. The poor man hesitated for too long. Sherian got rid of him with one swift movement of her sword, making Fitra scream in horror. She then turned to another soldier pleadingly. I can do this all day, she said with a terrifying smile. "Why are you doing this?" yelled Fitra. "Just do it yourself, you monster." Sherian turned to her. "Oh, I would gladly do that, Fitra, but each one of those men had the balls to hold my mother here and kill her militia. So, now they are either going to learn to obey who rightfully rules this place, or die like Vrihan's dogs." Behind her, Karine smiled, obviously proud of her daughter. Though she wasn't a fighter, Karine praised herself for raising her two children well. Fitra looked at the soldiers, realizing what Sherian was doing. This was simple and cruel torture. Vrihan had left those men behind to protect her, not for them to maim her. "Mother?" asked Sherian after a short silence. "Yes, daughter of mine." "How tall is the highest tower in the Diamond Palace?" "About 7 or 8 floors, I think." "Well, you see Fitra, we do have an option in case all of Vrihan's men remain stupidly obedient to your brother. I mean, it's only a few more floors than before, you might die for real this time, or maybe not." Fitra was panicked and so scared that she was on the verge of passing out. "Break it," she screamed at the closest soldier. "Do it. Please, hurry." Sherian almost let a satisfied smile out watching it. She knew Vrihan had actually done nothing but abandon his sister to her own fate, but she also really didn't care. Fitra had harmed Cassandra, killed Dahlia, and imprisoned their mother here. Sherian was too enraged to let this go. The sound of her bone breaking and the scream that followed, resonated for a few seconds. Anur couldn't watch, it made him a bit uneasy, even though he knew how merciless his family could be. But until now, there hadn't been many occasions to witness it himself. However, he was also livid about what happened. "What do you have to say about Vrihan?" he asked, finally stepping forward. He's prepared a trap for Karen," whimpered Fitra, holding her broken leg. "What kind of trap?" I don't." "You really are useless," sighed Sherian. While her daughter was still glaring at Fitra, Karine stepped forward, grabbed her sword, and without warning, slashed Fitra's hand. Another scream echoed within the palace's walls as the severed hand fell to the ground. The princess held her bleeding stump, her face white and deformed from the pain. "Try to heal that," hissed the imperial concubine. No one else could bear to watch the scene. Dragon blood could heal a lot of injuries, but it certainly couldn't regrow a limb. The blood continued to flow and Fitra clumsily tried to wrap it in her clothing, desperate. Meanwhile, Karine handed the weapon back to her daughter so Sherian could carefully clean it. "That was for slapping Cassandra and killing my servants and my men," said Karine. "I strongly advise you, never to use your remaining hand like that, or I'll cut it off too. I am not as merciful as my children, and I have no problem killing a her like you." Though she raised an eyebrow at being called merciful, Sherian didn't say anything. "So you're not going to kill her now?" asked Anur. "First, she doesn't deserve a quick death," replied Sherian. "Second, she'll still be useful until I can get my hands on Vrihan. She probably knows more than she lets on." "How will we find Cassandra and Miss Andra now?" he asked. "Is there a chance that they're still within the Diamond City?" "They couldn't be, Vrihan searched everywhere," replied Karine with a sigh. He even tortured some of my people and found the hideout under the waterfall. Thank the gods, the girls were long gone by then, but they left some fake clues that sent them towards the north. Brilliant girls! But no, from what my people have told me, the girls decided to go to the capital with the babies. By the great dragon, I can't believe they're born already. Sheren will go crazy when he gets back. I know, and I haven't even seen them since their birth. I'm going to kill them for making me miss that, growled Sheren, while glaring at Fitra and her guards. Is brother Sheren going to be okay? Asked Anur, worried. I'll go and check on him first, volunteered Sherian. I don't want to be presumptuous, but that rat is smart, and if he planned a trap for my brother, it's probably pretty serious. Everything about this war sounded off from the start. What about the girls? Shouldn't we find them first? If they're going to the capital by themselves with a baby and a baby dragon in tow. They don't have an adult dragon to fly with, it will take them days to get there. They are smart enough to stay out of sight until they reach the capital, and if those girls are hiding from Vrihan and his dragon, it will be hard for us or Rune to find them as well. No, I'd better go save my brother and get him there as soon as possible. Cray should be able to find his baby or Cassandra. I'm worried about your father, said Sheren. I don't think that old man is senile enough to have given that order willingly, not if everything was all right with him. Something must have happened in the capital, Vrihan would never have dared to act so boldly otherwise. How long will it take you to send new spies to the capital, mother? I can send people right away, but it will take longer for them to come back than for you to return from the Eastern Front with Sheren. Also, aren't you going to help me clean up around here? Sheren said, while pointing out all of the soldiers who were still waiting by Fitra's side. The men, suddenly getting nervous about what was going to follow, exchanged glances. Seriously, mother? You want me to take care of them before I go? Don't we have more urgent matters? I've cut enough hands off for today, I'm tired. Plus, are you really going to leave your poor defenseless mother to deal with these men? Do you know how many Vrihan left here? I can't even walk around or take my brunch quietly. What about recruiting them? Are you kidding me? Vrihan's army of little mutts? I wouldn't even allow them to scrape dragon off my floors. The men were still confused at the situation, and shocked by the women's words, as Sherian rolled her eyes and took out her sword once again. While Anur sighed and had to look elsewhere, sure enough Rune appeared over the walls, willing to help the princess do the bloody work. Between Sherian and Rune, every last one of Vrihan's soldiers were killed in less than 10 minutes, even the ones who desperately tried to escape. He really hadn't left many behind to protect his sister. After all was said and done, only Fitra was left standing with her half-healed stub, and Rune remained behind in the garden to guard her, even though it seems highly unlikely she'd be able to go anywhere in her current state. She was still white as a sheet, both from the fear and loss of blood. Then, Sherian accompanied her mother back inside, followed closely by Anur. So, brother really doesn't know what happened here. How could he? Vrihan killed all of my couriers and spies before I had a chance, not even a fly could have gotten out of this place before today. I bet Cray was able to sense his egg hatching though, he's always been very sensitive. The imperial concubine seemed to be back in charge as she was hurrying through her palace's halls. Sherian knew her mother well enough to know that, despite Vrihan's siege, there was no way Sheren had completely run out of resources. The little dragon still followed her closely, as Sheren walked to where a door was hidden, which opened into another secret hideout. Sherian raised an eyebrow. She had spent half of her childhood in this palace, but there were apparently still many things she had never seen before. Through the hidden door, they climbed some very narrow stairs all the way to the top of a secret tower. It was a room filled with birds, including a couple of falcons. Sheren whistled, and one of them flew to her wrist. She rolled up a small note she had taken the time to write while Sherian was getting rid of the soldiers and tied it to the bird's foot. The falcon left the tower with the message, clearly heading towards the capital. "Mother, I thought all your spies were dead. Those who were supposed to return. However, I of course do still have many friends in the palace. That was my fastest bird. We'll get news quicker this way." "I see. Mother, you never told Cassandra about Dahlia being one of your people, did you?" "She didn't need to know and now it's irrelevant." "Poor girl. Come on, let's go back downstairs. I want to get the production of the medical kits back on track to help your brother, and I need to recruit more people as soon as possible." "What are you talking about? Medical kits?" While they walked back down into the Diamond Palace, Sheren quickly explained everything Cassandra and Miss Andra had been doing to help Karen's army while staying here. In a few words, she let her know about the production of medical kits and the feedback they had received from the front before Vrihan's arrival. Sherian nodded. "Oh. I was getting fed up with all those officials praising her all the time back at the northern camp as if she was some messiah, and now the girl has done it again. Karen really knows how to pick them. Does that woman ever stop? As if. But it's not like everyone can go around playing with a sword to solve their problems." Sherian rolled her eyes again, exasperated. Her mother had been very happy to see her and her sword just minutes ago to clear her palace of all of Vrihan's men, hadn't she? "Anyway, we still need to figure out where the girls might go once they reach the capital," said Sheren. "They probably won't be able to enter the imperial palace without us, and we might not get to the capital before they do, but we can find ways to help them before that. If only I knew exactly where they would go." Miss Andra mentioned an ex-husband, said Anur, a little bitter. "I have one better than that," said Sherian with a smirk. "I had almost forgotten about the guy before you mentioned the medical kits and all of Cassandra's doings, but..." The princess walked back to the entrance of the castle, where the man she had arrived with was still looking a bit sick. He was standing very straight, and trying to look anywhere but at the bodies Sherian had left behind during her cleaning episode earlier. Sheren looked at the man, a bit confused. She had never seen him before, but he was obviously dressed as an imperial servant and had the demeanor of a man who had been trained for that role as well. He kneeled respectfully as soon as the imperial concubine, princess, and prince were in sight. "Greetings, imperial concubine Sheren. Who is this?" "Cassie's former babysitter," said Sherian. "My name is Evan, Your Highness. I was indeed Lady Cassandra's escort and assistant back when she resided in the northern camp with His Highness, a few months ago." "Oh. Why did you bring the man here then, asked the imperial concubine Sheren, still refusing to acknowledge the servant. Tell her. Yes, Your Highness, said Evan, bowing again. This humble servant happens to have exchanged a flattering number of letters with Lady Cassandra over the last few weeks. I mentioned our close relationship to Her Highness, Princess Sherian, and she politely agreed to bring me here to see the lady again. Sheren exchanged a look with Sherian, but the princess immediately turned to Evan again. You know where Cassie would go in the capital, don't you? Yes, Your Highness. In her latest letters, Lady Cassandra happened to mention a residence she had acquired in the capital recently, thanks to His Highness the Third Prince. As a suggestion to Her Highness Princess Sherian, I strongly believe Lady Cassandra will be very likely to go there first. Sheren was baffled for a few seconds. A residence? Since when did my son have a residence in the capital to gift Cassandra? When did he buy it? Evan cleared his throat, slightly embarrassed by the next bit of information. Well, His Highness didn't exactly buy said residence. I would classify this as forcefully retrieved compensation from Lady Cassandra's former owner. Oh, now that makes more sense, said Sherian, nodding. Anyway, do you know where that residence is? I do not have an exact address, but I certainly have enough of a description of its facade and neighborhood for someone who knows the capital city well enough to find out, Your Highness. Good. Go get one of my servants and have them send a courier in my name to the capital right away. We can't lose any more time. I'll make sure our Cassie and her sister get everything they need, and some extra protection too. If Rihan wants to make another attempt on my beloved grandson's life, he's going to have to kill me first. Evan bowed once again and left quickly to follow Sheren's orders and send the courier right away, making a clear detour around the bodies still scattered in the palace garden. Meanwhile, Sherian turned to her mother with suspicious eyes. Aren't you going to go there yourself, mother? Asked Sherian, crossing her arms. What are you talking about? I'll go with you and your brother once you've retrieved him from whatever battlefield he is on. Besides, now that Vrihan's little mutts are handled, I need to interrogate his useless sister some more. You think you can be more convincing than me? Asked Sherian, placing a hand on her sword. Sherian, I am your mother. I was dealing with the palace's schemes and snakes long before you were born, dear. This isn't my first fight and she isn't the first person I'll be interrogating. If I couldn't make a girl like her talk, I wouldn't be worthy to be called the Emperor's favorite anymore. As Sheren walked back to the garden, Anur grimaced. She's really scary sometimes. Well, that's my mother. Come on Anur, let's get going before Sheren gets himself killed. Mother is capable of burning the capital down if anything happens to him or her new grandson. The little dragon crouched in the grass, its eyes set on the target. Its long, thin tail waved in the air while its little hips swayed a bit, getting ready to jump, and its little snout twitched as those big, green eyes focused on its prey, waiting for the perfect moment. Suddenly, the little rodent moved and the dragon pounced on it. The little creature squeaked at the sudden attack, but it was too late. The fierce hunter had caught its prey. The little paws had it trapped and it was watching the rat trying to escape from its grasp with wide-eyed wonder. The baby dragon was far too hungry to wait any longer though. It was time to eat. It finished his meal in 4 bites, licking its chops and paws carefully to make sure nothing was missed. Then, it turned around and trotted back, very pleased with itself. What a fierce hunter it was! "Kian, did you eat again?" asked Cassandra, seeing the little dragon bounding back to them. The dragon scampered over to her side, rubbing its head against her hip. Cassandra smiled, caressing the young dragon. She was seated against a tree, busy feeding her son. Just like Kian, Cassandra had a ferocious appetite. Both never seemed to have enough. Whenever Cassandra saw Kian walk away to go hunting, she knew her newborn was probably hungry as well. Though it was tough caring for the two of them, there were some advantages as well. The only problem they really had was that a hungry dragon could get very fussy and would bite pretty much anything. While Kian would never hurt Cassandra, Miss Andra had quickly needed to buy a pair of very thick shoes. "Hi New, I'm back." Miss Andra appeared between the trees, carrying a bag with some recent purchases. They had agreed that she would need to do the shopping alone, as Cassandra was afraid someone would recognize her in town. Moreover, Kian was never far from her, and the little dragon hadn't quite grasped the concept of staying hidden. The younger sister kept a watchful eye on the little dragon's movements as she approached. Kian had a bad habit of trying to hunt her fingers or toes as a game, but the young dragon hadn't quite caught on that the playful biting was really quite painful. She had several bandages on her little digits to prove that. "Kian's done eating already," chuckled Cassandra. "They are probably just going to nap next." Indeed, Cassandra wasn't really drinking anymore, and his eyes were starting to close. They were still dark, but Cassandra suspected they might lighten a bit as he got older, and she could see hints of green in them. "Good," said Miss Andra. "Because I won't be able to keep walking much longer if that little guy keeps chewing on my toes." Kian's head raised up, turning to her with knowing eyes as if the dragon could tell what she was talking about. "Yes, you." The baby dragon let out a little grumble that resembled a cat's husky meow more than a scary growl. Miss Andra shook her head. She actually liked the little, mischievous dragon, if only it would hold back on the biting and chewing on her. "I still don't know how Lady Sheren handled 2 or 3 of these," sighed Miss Andra, opening up her bag. Despite her complaints, she had of course bought some more dry meat to help fill the little dragon's stomach. Kian had only begun to hunt recently, and was still perfecting it. From what Cassandra had learned from Lady Sheren, a dragon's parent would share its food until their baby could hunt well enough on its own. The thought made her feel a bit sad. If only Cray was there, Kian would have learned how to hunt properly by now. And to bite less too. "Anything new?" asked Cassandra, watching her sister empty the contents of the bag. "Well, first I've got more diapers for the little prince because I can't believe how many times a day we have to wash those, and I've even started feeling sorry for those poor river fish. Also, more food. Oh, and I found your favorite berries. Some dry meat for the little carnivore. Do we still have enough money?" "Yeah, don't worry, Hainu. I'm making sure we get a good deal on everything. Plus, the stuff we sold was worth a lot. I've never carried so much money on myself before, it makes me happy to spend and get rid of some of it. We'll definitely have enough until we reach the capital, especially if we keep going at this rate." Cassandra nodded. The girls had left the Diamond Palace almost a week ago now, and they were finally close to the capital, despite having walked slower than anticipated. It was mostly her fault, though. Even if Cassandra helped her carry Cassian, Cassandra was exhausted after giving birth and she couldn't move as fast as she had hoped during those first few days. Moreover, there had been news of soldiers looking for her much sooner than she had counted on. Vrihan had left some of his soldiers in 2 of the towns he had come through before the Diamond Palace, but thankfully, no one seemed to recognize Cassandra. However, this forced them to walk even further away from the towns, and though they tried to see as few as possible, pausing for each of Cassandra's supplies runs was just adding further delays to their trip. Plus, your little sister is really good at getting discounts, Cassandra added with a wink. Cassandra sighed. The truth was, Cassandra was very pretty and she was very good at using her charms, but she still couldn't help but worry about her methods used to get discounts. She knew there was nothing wrong with flirting with the merchants a little, but she was afraid she'd overdo it and have to fend off one of those men by herself. Don't get into trouble, me. Don't worry, I can handle myself. I'm used to it, remember? Plus, those townsfolk are nothing close to the imperial family, I can defend myself just fine. Anyway, it's their mistake for being morons. Suddenly, Kian's tail started wagging again, its eyes riveted on Cassandra's bag. She noticed and sighed. Well, he definitely smelled the dry meat. I thought I had wrapped it up enough this time. He's worse than a dog, and he's not even tamed yet. He's a baby dragon, chuckled Cassandra. I don't think there's any way to tame him. She put her hand on Kian's back, scratching those silver scales to distract and prevent the little dragon from pouncing on the bag. Well, at least he knows how to listen to his mother. Also, Hainu, I heard some weird stuff while I was in town. Cassandra frowned. Cassandra's expression looked somber. What had happened? Could it be about Vrihan? Or the Emperor? Getting news as they traveled through the forest, while avoiding main roads, made getting information much harder even though they tried to ask at each town Cassandra stopped in, they just hadn't heard much. The information wasn't traveling into the little towns as fast as it did between the bigger cities, and most townsfolk didn't pay much attention to the news from the capital either, unless it involved their taxes. Cassandra sat in front of her, her face a bit scrunched, as Cassandra laid Cassian down and put her top back on. Some guy at one of the stands was saying that the capital is getting ready to crown a new emperor. They said the old one is dying. Cassandra's heart sank. Dying? The old emperor? Karen's father? What had happened? This was worse than bad news. She had been hoping that the emperor would grant her refuge inside the castle and protect her from Vrihan, but now, if he was dying? Cassandra bit her lip, unsure of her next steps now and heavy with worry. Did they say anything else? She asked. Not really. The guy at the shop heard it from his brother's wife, who heard it from her cousin who knew a soldier's sister, blah blah blah, and so on. You know, the modern way of getting information around here. I don't really know if it's reliable, but it sure sounds fishy. It really does, whispered Cassandra. This was too much to just be gossip. The emperor was perfectly fine and healthy a few weeks ago, so what could have happened since then? Cassandra couldn't believe this was only some coincidence. Sheren being sent to the battlefront, the first Prince Zephyr's unexpected death. This was too much all at once, and a bit too convenient for the second prince. Cassandra bit at her fingernail, looking worried as well. Are you sure we should keep heading to the capital? If something really did happen to the Emperor, it changes things, right? You wouldn't be protected at all. Cassandra was trying hard to decide on which way to go. Indeed, if anything had happened to the Emperor, the Imperial Palace wouldn't be safe for her anymore. She wasn't sure Sheren would get there before she did, and if she arrived just as the palace had a new owner, she might not survive this time. Cassandra wasn't losing sight of the fact that the second prince also had a dragon. His dragon was the third largest in the empire, after Glahad and Cray. She had escaped him once, but Cassandra wasn't in any hurry to face them again. Her injury from it was carefully wrapped in some bandages, but she wouldn't forget about the pain of it so soon. Hainu. Cassandra called out to her gently. Let's keep going. For now, we don't have anything confirmed. As you said, those may only be rumors. We can always confirm them once we reach the capital without going to the Imperial Palace directly. Cassandra frowned, unsure about the plan. She wasn't fond of the idea of going back to the capital to begin with, but now, this could be more deadly than they had originally thought. She was going to go along with her older sister's decisions in any case, but she couldn't shake the feeling that everything was not going to be as Cassandra hoped. The Emperor is definitely still alive, said Cassandra. How do you know? Lady Sheren. When Sheren arrived in the Diamond Palace to kidnap me, she confronted him, and he couldn't seem to answer. If the Emperor was in fact dead, he definitely wouldn't have let her talk to him the way she did. So, Lady Sheren is still the Emperor's favorite concubine, and thus untouchable. The second prince hates her just as much, if not more, than he hates Sheren and Sherian. Oh! Cassandra realized Cassandra was right. It all made sense. But for how much longer would that still be valid? The rumors said that the Emperor was dying, not dead. Which meant that if they were right, this was now going to be a race against the clock. Have you heard anything about the war? Cassandra inquired. She shook her head. No. Which means it's still going on, sighed Cassandra. Cassandra nodded with a somber expression. No matter how isolated the little towns were, news of a victory would travel the fastest, most notably because people would spot the black dragon in the sky. Plus, if Sheren was searching for her, he would have been to both the Diamond Palace and the Imperial Palace by now, which made Cassandra think something bad had happened. Sherian had hinted that this should be a quick win, but it seemed as if the princess had been wrong. Don't worry, I'm sure he's fine, said Cassandra. Whatever the Eastern Army has going on, Sheren is the war god and the best fighter in the Empire. Cassandra smiled gently. Lady Sheren mentioned this war was probably not a coincidence either. With Prince Sherian's arrival at the Diamond Palace after Prince Zephyr's death, too. That rat face is definitely pulling the strings, Cassandra interrupted. I bet his whole plan was to get Sheren far enough away from the Imperial Palace for as long as he could. That way, he could eliminate the competition as quickly as possible, and make his moves quietly. I don't understand. Even if Zephyr and the Emperor died, and Sherian is named Emperor, Sheren could still return at any time, whispered Cassandra. What is he thinking? Cassandra, your prince is with the Imperial Army. No matter who the Emperor is, they'll act as he says. Now, imagine you have an evil mind and crazy ambition for a second. I mean, if I were Sheren, I would try to get rid of all my enemies at once, send the most threatening one to a faraway battlefront to be killed, or at least kept busy, so I could get rid of the other obstacles, my eldest brother, and the Emperor with a shiny dragon. That way, even if the war god isn't killed in battle, I would now be the one who could give orders to have the Imperial Army kill him. Cassandra sighed. Sometimes you're awfully devious, me. Try growing up in a brothel, scoffed her sister. You have no idea how petty and wicked people can be in there. Cassandra tried to imagine other scenarios, but actually, her sister's logic was pretty sound. The only thing that didn't make sense was the timing, it all felt awfully rushed. She couldn't see Sheren as a man capable of putting such a risky plan into action. As she shared her doubts with Cassandra, the younger sister thought out loud. Well, you know, there might have been a little detail that forced him to rush things. Without saying anything else, Cassandra nodded towards Cassian. Cassandra and her sister exchanged worried glances. For a while now, they had been among a massive crowd of people, looking at the long line that was waiting to enter the capital. Dozens of people of all ages were waiting to get in, a lot of them annoyed by the draconian security checks. About 10 guards were manning the front, checking all the men, women, and even the children. The sisters, both hidden in the crowd, were strategizing how they were going to be able to get in, and how risky this could be. The soldiers were scrutinizing every person, not even letting a toddler get through without scanning them over. Cassandra and Cassandra had covered themselves under newly bought shawls and were trying to avoid any suspicion. There were actually quite a few habitations and shops outside the walls, so the crowd wasn't that surprising, and they could easily blend in like trees in a forest. Cassian was asleep, strapped to Cassandra's back, but Kian kept popping its head out of Cassandra's bag, and thinking she was playing, the young dragon kept trying to bite her fingers each time she pushed it back in. They're really checking everyone, whispered Cassandra. This is definitely one of the stupid prince's moves to prevent you or the war god from getting in. Indeed, this much security at the wall wasn't normal. Usually, people could come and go as they pleased and the guards at the doors only just inspected to verify they weren't carrying weapons illegally, or to check the merchandise. Cassandra bit her lip. She hadn't foreseen such a problem. With their white skin and green eyes, the sisters would be recognized immediately if they tried to go in like this. She couldn't even sneak just Cassandra in, as her sister fit most of the description Sheren would have given out about her. All right, plan B then I guess, sighed Cassandra, suddenly opening the little pocket where she kept their money. What plan B? Asked Cassandra, surprised. Cassandra counted how much money they had left and nodded. We need someone's help to get us in, and I happen to know someone who can help with that, but not unless we give him lots of money, so, I really hope you still have that residence and people who can at least feed us afterward. Cassandra hesitated for a moment, then suddenly realized what her sister was planning. Me? You're thinking about the men you owe money to? Yeah. I mean, I owe them a lot, but if your prince can pay up once this is over, and I tell them they can make even more money if they help us, then they might. Miss Andra, I'm not sure those people you owe money to are alive anymore. Miss Andra lifted her focus from the bag, frowning. How is that? When we were looking for you, Princess Sherian and I ran into a bunch of bandits, with tattoos. She and Cray kind of killed them all. Miss Andra seemed surprised for a moment before she looked lost in her thoughts, and then turned to Cassandra again. How many people do you think they killed? Maybe about 20 or 30 in total. I'm not sure. Oh, that's fine then. I pissed off way more people than that. Cassandra was speechless. Miss Andra laughed at her sister's look of shock as she walked to the closest shop and bought some paper and ink to write a quick note. Then, her younger sister found a boy in the crowd and gave it to him, asking him to deliver it to the Red District in exchange for a bit of gold. The boy nodded and happily took it. The two sisters watched him walk through the line, but Cassandra was still unsure about this plan. Is it fine if he just hands it to anyone in the Red District? Didn't you have a name or something? Miss Andra smirked. I really pissed off a lot of people there. Cassandra nodded as she remembered the quite exhaustive list of establishments that kept a bitter memory of her younger sister, having visited each of them and listened to stories of Miss Sandra's mischief firsthand. Trust me, Miss Andra added. If we don't hear anything in the next hour, it only means that the boy kept the gold. But I can always send another one. So they waited. To Cassandra's surprise, the answer wasn't long to come. The sisters watched as an older woman stormed out through the gate carrying a bag and glaring intensely into the crowd, seemingly looking for someone specific. Of course, Miss Andra was watching the whole scene from afar with a little smile on. Not a bad pick, I guess. They didn't approach, instead waiting for the woman to spot them. When she finally spotted Miss Andra, she barreled their way, looking furious. While Cassandra was worried, Miss Andra was quietly waiting with a caustic smirk and crossed arms. The woman was about twice their age and unusually muscular, with short black hair and tattoos on her face. She looked like a demon on a mission as she approached. I can't believe you have balls to send me this crap, she yelled, throwing the note at Miss Sandra's feet. Nice to see you again, Verna. I missed you, too. Don't give me that arrogant crap, me. I only came because you owe me some money, and you paid that boy 3 gold coins. 3. Where is my money? The woman reached for Miss Sandra's bag, but unfortunately for her, it was well guarded. As soon as her hand was within reach of it, Kian furiously tried to bite her, making her scream and quickly retract her hand. Miss Andra chuckled while the woman stared at the bag, her eyes wide in shock. What was that thing? A personal security system, Miss Andra laughed. Now, before I give you anything, did you bring what I asked for? The woman scowled and tossed the bag at the girls. I did, you little. Yes, I do have it, but I want my money, you little brat. Ignoring her for a moment, Miss Andra crouched down to inspect the contents of the bag as Cassandra frowned behind her. To her surprise, her younger sister pulled out some little pots filled with what looked like makeup, 2 large circles of metal, and 2 white dresses. That's my plan, said Miss Andra with an apologetic smile. I know it's probably not a good memory for you, but we're going to have to disguise ourselves as slaves to get in. The guards won't spend too much time checking slaves when they're focusing on looking for a concubine. A concubine, repeated Verna, glancing at Cassandra. Me, what have you gotten yourself into this time? Mind your own business, V. But thanks, you did get everything. Hey, I want my money, me. Now. Or I'm ratting you two out to the soldiers. I'm not stupid, you know. Miss Andra sighed, took out the little purse, and threw it to her. Verna caught it and started fanatically counting the money. It was a minute, but then her angry expression slowly returned. Are you kidding me? This isn't even a fifth of what you promised. I knew I couldn't trust you. Do you think I'm walking around with gold bars in my purse? You'll get the rest once you get us inside. Verna seemed to hesitate for a moment, glancing at Cassandra and Miss Andra. Her eyes fell on Cassian too, for a couple of minutes. The baby was awake and quietly laying in the fabric tied around his mother, his mouth making a little. Verna spent a few more seconds observing his features and his mother's skin tone before her eyes went back to Miss Sandra's bag with a suspicious frown. A concubine, you said? You're not going to get me into more trouble, are you? I promise, as soon as we get to my residence safely, I'll make sure you get the rest of your money, said Cassandra. She was desperate, but if the woman didn't help them now or decided to sell them out to the soldiers, the situation would take a tragic turn. Cassandra only hoped that the people at the residence still had enough money on hand to pay the difference. They didn't want to lose any more time. If Cassian cried or Kian got impatient, the soldiers could notice them, and then they'd all easily be captured. At least once they were past the gates and inside the capital they would be safer. Verna clicked her tongue. Me, you better have my money or I swear I'm exposing you to the first guard I see. Miss Andra nodded and gathered everything inside the bag again. Then she grabbed Cassandra's arm, pulling her sister away from the crowd to a spot under some trees where no one would see or disrupt them. So, these people are probably going to be looking for girls matching our physical description. Even if we're disguised as slaves, we still couldn't just walk in. That's why I asked Verna to bring all of this. Miss Andra motioned over all the little pots of makeup. Will this really tan our skin enough to blend in with the locals? Is that even possible? Of course. You have no idea how much makeup the girls inside the brothels used. First, this is to dye our hair black. It's rather quick and they use it all the time. There was an uproar every time someone spotted a white hair. Oh, and this is for naturally tanning the skin. I'm not sure how much it'll work on us, but at least we won't look as white. Crap, I hope there's enough. Well, we don't need to be completely coated, as long as we keep our arms covered and are careful about our hands. Cassandra kept nodding, she was truly impressed. Her sister had really become a master at deceiving people. To even think up such a plan so fast was a little bit scary, but still extremely impressive. What about Kian and Cassian? They're going to search our bags, and if they find us with a baby, we can have Verna carry him. She doesn't look anything like you, and thankfully, he looks more like his dad. Excuse me, said Verna, looking astonished. I never agreed to smuggle someone else's brat in. Stop fussing, think about the money, retorted Miss Andra, brushing her aside. The problem is Kian. It's not going to be that easy to conceal a dragon, he's already almost too big for the bag and they are definitely going to check it. Cassandra glanced at the sky with a little frown on. We can try having him fly over the wall. He probably won't want to follow me through the crowd and might decide to just fly over the wall himself. Yeah, that would work. We just need to make sure the baby flying lizard could be mistaken for a bird. A very big bird, but still, a bird nonetheless. The two sisters spent the next hour dyeing their hair black and covering their skin with the bronzing powder, making sure nothing was too unnatural. They couldn't hide the color of their eyes, but this was another advantage of posing as slaves. Their eyes would be directed at the ground with no one questioning it. It actually didn't take them as long to cover Kian with dust, making sure the silver scales weren't shining anymore and covering its tail with leaves to make them look like feathers. The result was quite strange, leaving Verna, who was still speechless about the baby dragon in the first place, with a grin. You think people will take that for a bird? Are you insane? He would have a better chance of posing as a cat with wings. Oh, shut up, retorted Miss Andra. We're not taking him to be examined up close, he just needs to fly above us for less than a minute and come back down. No one will give a second glance at a bird and there are several sizable falcons living in the area. We just need the illusion to last for as long as it takes us to cross that border. You're crazy, concluded Verna. A crazy genius, but crazy. I'm still holding you to what you owe me even if this doesn't work. Stop whining. We just need to set you up with Cassian, cross that stupid checkpoint and you'll get your money. Cassandra frowned. Aside from Miss Andra, she was very reluctant to let another woman carry her child. However, she didn't have much of a choice right now, and it would only be for a few minutes. The two girls made sure the baby was comfortably secured against Verna, and Cassandra kissed his forehead gently, making sure he wasn't too perturbed by the new person. He had been carried by Miss Andra several times before and rarely cried. Kian was usually the one to get fussy. Cassandra focused on him for the next few minutes while her younger sister checked her hair for her once more and braided it. All right, it doesn't really suit you, but it should at least deceive the guards unless they are makeup experts, which is highly unlikely. Can we just go already? Verna huffed. Ready, Hainu. Ready, sighed Cassandra. The wait in the line was awfully nerve-wracking and there were a lot of people waiting impatiently to get inside the capital. Cassandra and Miss Andra did their best to keep their heads low, the younger sister trying her best to mimic her older sister. The big rings of metal around their neck were actually old slavery collars that Verna had retrieved from girls that had bought their freedom. The locks were broken so they could easily be opened, but that wouldn't be visible to the guards, as they were also wearing shawls and covering their napes with their hair. Verna was the worst actress of the three. She kept glancing down at Cassian, looking very awkward. The baby didn't seem to care much about who carried him as his eyes were constantly following his mother. Meanwhile, the one who was supposed to be pretending to be his mother looked like she was horribly embarrassed to be carrying a baby at all. Thankfully, Kian was quietly staying in the forest. Cassandra was worried, though. After several attempts, she thought she managed to lull the baby dragon enough to stay put and hopefully take a nap while they made their way inside, but she was still afraid it would come out at any moment and give them away. She was counting on the crowd though, Kian had never been around so many people at once and tended to stay away from strangers. Hopefully, the little dragon would find something in the forest to distract itself with for long enough before she called for it to fly over. When they were only a few people away from the entrance, both sisters tried to pay extra close attention to the guards. The men were obviously bored with the job and not paying much attention. People were getting angry about the wait and several officials didn't even hold back and were complaining and scolding them. Therefore, the soldiers were doing their best to check the people quickly and move on to the next one. This was good news for the girls, they probably wouldn't be checked too long either. "You, with the baby," one of them called when Verna stepped forward. "Is that yours?" "It's my niece, I'm bringing her back to my brother." His wife couldn't take it anymore and left him alone with the kid. "Can you believe that? What a star! Your niece is cute though. My wife just had twins and all they do is cry. You look lucky, she's quite behaved. Can I see your bag?" "Sure, here," she stated as she handed over her bag. "So far so good, but it's almost her milk time. Gotta get her back to her dad soon." "Oh, sure. Wait, are those slaves with you?" Cassandra and Cassandra kept their heads down and stepped closer to Verna. They could barely breathe, but everything had been going well so far. "Yet. Is there something wrong? You have 2 slaves? You don't look that wealthy." Cassandra felt a pearl of sweat glide down her spine. Stupid guard, couldn't he just mind his own business? "Hey, I might not have the looks but I work hard. The Red District pays well, hun. I actually got those 2 from their masters, and at a good price, too. Just check the bag, you'll see I have plenty left." "Oh, I see. Be careful though, they're getting stricter on the laws about slaves." "Well, those 2 look pretty fat, probably not too bad, eh?" Cassandra went red. This was her first time being called fat. She had just given birth, but still. Cassandra, making sure to keep her head down, couldn't keep herself from rolling her eyes. Stupid soldier. "All right, you're free to go. Come on people, let's keep it moving." Finally, they made it in, making sure to get away from the crowd as quickly as possible and slide into one of the narrower side streets. Cassandra let out a long sigh of relief. "I can't believe that worked." "Me neither," said Verna. "Here, just take back your kid." Cassandra happily opened her arms. She was glad to finally have her son back and the baby immediately gripped a strand of her hair. She checked him over, but Cashin really didn't look upset in any way, his eyes stayed riveted on the strand of black hair with his familiar little frown on. "Good one, making him pass for a girl," chuckled Cassandra. "Guess you're smarter than you look." Verna glared at her while snatching the bag from her hands, furiously rummaging through its contents. "Oh, shut up. Now, where is my money?" "You better." Before Verna could finish her sentence, a sudden ruckus was heard behind them. Cassandra went white. People near the gate were screaming and pointing fingers towards the sky while someone yelled something about a horrible, flying monster. Cassandra grimaced. I guess the other baby decided not to wait for the cue. Sure enough, they soon spotted Kian quickly flying their way. The little flapping wings were causing the fake feathers to fall off and the dust was blowing away with the wind. Not far below the little dragon, the girls could hear soldiers screaming as they tried to follow it. They would have no problem spotting them now. Oh, crap! Miss Andra reacted quickly, grabbing her sister's hand and dragging them down several different streets. Verna didn't follow, opting to grab their bag and take off in the opposite direction. The two girls didn't have any time to think about the loss. They started running through various alleys trying to hide from the soldiers. Behind them, Kian thought it was so fun to be flying overhead, but still following closely. Miss Andra quickly snatched the baby dragon from the air. They couldn't risk it flying above their heads and giving away their position. Cassandra held Cassian tightly, completely panicked. She had no idea where they were headed as she blindly followed her younger sister, praying they wouldn't be followed. They ran for a while until Miss Andra suddenly grabbed Cassandra's hand and pulled her into a hideout. The door looked locked from the outside but, to those who knew, it only needed a slight push to allow entrance into a small, abandoned garden. And it was very small indeed as Cray wouldn't have even been able to squeeze its head into it. The sisters scrambled in and Miss Andra quickly closed the door behind them. With their backs to it now, they tried to quiet their breathing so they could listen for the soldiers' steps. They were already hard enough to hear over the constant yelling of orders. Once they finally heard the footsteps run past the door, both girls finally let out a breath of relief as they held onto the babies. Cassian was wiggling around in Cassandra's arms looking uncomfortable, probably unhappy about the excitement from earlier. Kian too, didn't like being held. The dragon struggled in Miss Sandra's arms, wagging its tail in protest. Thankfully, she had quickly picked up how to handle the baby dragon and kept her hand tight around its snout to avoid getting bitten. The sisters waited like that for a few more minutes, standing with their backs against the door, holding their breath. They were both terrified. Those men had definitely seen Kian and would probably realize Cassandra was back in the capital now too. Once it calmed back down outside, Cassandra slid down the door, her bottom hitting the ground with a small thud and releasing a sigh from her lips. She couldn't believe they had really made it in with her sister's crazy plan. She took off the fake collar, tossing it to the side, and rubbed Cassian's little hands to help calm herself. "I'm exhausted," sighed Miss Andra. "I hope your people have got some good beds for us." "Me too. But that woman took our money." "Verna?" "No, she didn't. I have it here." Miss Andra suddenly pulled out a little purse from under her shawl. Cassandra had lost hers while they were running, but apparently that didn't matter. Cassandra frowned. "But she had it when we were checked." "How did you?" "Funny enough, when she grabbed the bag away from me." Cassandra sighed. "Me? What? We need the money, just in case. Plus, she doesn't even know where we're going, so it's fine." Cassandra kept shaking her head. Miss Andra was truly another level of mischievous. But at least they had some money for now, so they wouldn't have to worry in case something went wrong at the residence. Cassandra didn't know what to expect there, but she hoped her friends would be able to help them out. They had been sleeping in the woods for a week now with a baby and a dragon baby and they could really use a good night's rest. "How did you know that door wasn't locked?" "I know several good hideouts like these throughout the city. It's kind of useful when you need to run away." Cassandra. What? I already told you I pissed off a lot of people. We need to talk about your debts once this is all over, sighed Cassandra. Cassandra shrugged. Anyway, do you know how far we are from your residence? Cassandra took a deep breath as she tried to recall which part of the capital they were in. It was such a large city and they had run through several streets too. Cassandra wasn't so familiar with all the districts, but she could remember the way from the gate. Judging by how much they had run earlier, they probably weren't too far. Maybe about 10 minutes away. All right, then let's wait a bit more to be sure those soldiers are gone and then go. Cassandra nodded. She got up and looked around for a water source, as all gardens had one, and went to wash away the tan from her hands and face. With her shawl and their spare clothing gone, there was no point walking around with her hands and face being darker than her arms. She quickly washed all of the dye from her hair as well, and Cassandra did the same after her. They both still had some black in their hair, but their skin was back to its original porcelain color. Meanwhile, the young prince and dragon had been playing next to them on the shawl Cassandra had laid out. The human baby was still too young to move around much, but he'd grab Kian's tail and hold on despite the young dragon's attempts to shake him off. Cassandra chuckled while catching the scene, and took Cassian in her arms, gently kissing his plump, little cheeks. The baby grabbed at her dress with a pout. All right, let's go, she sighed. They couldn't put Kian in the bag anymore, as Verna had run away with it. So, Cassandra tightly wrapped the little dragon in her shawl, covering its head as much as she could so it would look like it was just an oddly shaped package. Thankfully, it was dusk now, and with the sky getting darker, it would hopefully decrease their chances of being spotted. Both sisters carefully stepped out of the hideout. Cassandra walked a bit ahead to check each street first. They were being extremely careful, and luckily didn't run into any soldiers. Following Cassandra's instincts, they took the most crowded streets, hiding among the people and acting as if they were just passing through. Cassandra was the most afraid of being spotted. Holding Cassian against her chest, she desperately tried not to look up at the sky. If only the black dragon could appear now. After waiting in a narrow street for a bunch of soldiers doing their patrol to leave, they finally arrived at the street of Cassandra's residence. She was nervous. What if Rihan knew about this place? What if something had happened while she was away? What if they were locked out, without any help and with only the little bit of money they had left? Cassandra took a deep breath and knocked on the door while her younger sister kept a lookout, but thankfully, the street was deserted. At first, no one answered. Desperate, she tried again. She hadn't been here in ages. This is a private residence, yelled a voice from behind the door. State your name and your business. Despite the rude answer, Cassandra immediately smiled. Yazora. It's me, Cassandra. Open the door please. Don't yell that. Cassandra said, looking worried. Oh, by the gods. Finally. The woman opened the door and grabbed Cassandra's wrist, yanking her in. Yazora was wearing a green dress with her hair braided down her back and some streaks of white showing through. She seemed to have aged a bit, but she still looked much healthier than the last time Cassandra had seen her. As Cassandra and Cassandra walked in, they were surprised to see several lights on in the residence. Yozora wouldn't let go of Cassandra's hand, almost shaking. "We've been waiting for you too," the older woman exclaimed, her eyes looking as if she was about to cry. "I was starting to fear something had happened. Now, come on." After one last glance around to make sure they hadn't been followed, both sisters were pulled inside, the door closing tightly behind them. Kian, who apparently had enough of being carried by Miss Andra, let out a little high-pitched chirp as it jumped out of the shawl she had been trying to keep him wrapped in. The baby dragon landed on the ground, more of a little tumble than gracefully, but quickly got back on its feet to start sniffing and looking around. Meanwhile, the exhausted sisters finally let out a long sigh of relief. Cassandra turned to Yozora, confused. "You were expecting us? Why?" Next to her, she knew Miss Andra already had her hand on her little dagger, just in case this turned out to be a trap of some sort. However, it was very unlikely. Officially, there was nothing tying Cassandra to this residence. Sheren had just gotten rid of its owner and freed all the slaves. More than likely, no one had stopped to take care of the paperwork. With the exception of her tired eyes, the middle-aged servant lady looked the best that Cassandra had ever seen. Yozora took her hand, nodding. "We've been so worried." 2 days ago, out of the blue, a man showed up at the door saying he had come under the orders of Imperial concubine Sheren. "He told us you would likely arrive here soon, with your younger sister and a newborn. He told us to be ready to help you. He said we had to do anything we could to assist you as soon as you arrived, and make sure no one found you. He gave us plenty of money and food to fill our storage cupboard too. Oh, and we also have a letter that came for you, carried by a messenger bird, from an imperial servant named Evan." "Evan," exclaimed Cassandra, surprised to hear about him. "Someone you know, Hainu?" asked Miss Andra, confused. "Prince Sheren appointed him as my attendant back when we stayed in the North Camp. He accompanied me everywhere all day, he's a good man." Just then, Cassandra started getting agitated in his mother's arms. A bit unhappy, the baby started moving his closed fists and cried, visibly upset. "Oh, come in. Let's take care of you first, you must be exhausted." "Don't worry, we have everything ready." Yozora guided them inside the residence. Cassandra had lived several years in this place, and she could see the changes since the last time she had come here. First, the roof that Cray had torn apart had been repaired, though the place seemed to have been renovated as some storage place. Furthermore, leaving all the servants in charge without a direct master had made the house appear livelier than ever before. Plants were happily growing in the gardens, with some cats playing around. Also, a lot of doors were left open, allowing the young servants to rush from one place to another without worry. However, as Yozora had promised, everyone had been waiting for them. As soon as they walked in, Cassandra was surrounded by many familiar faces. The young servants and former slaves she had worked with years prior circled around her, greeting her and vocalizing amazement and awe for her baby. However, Cassandra wasn't in the mood for the introductions. The young little prince continued his crying and fussing until Yozora yelled for the young ones to clear the area and get to work. She was apparently appointed the natural head of the house until Cassandra returned. First, both girls got to take a bath in one of the large indoor bathtubs of the residence. As if they were some valued guests, the two sisters and Cassandra were given complete attention by the servants. After almost a week of surviving in the wilderness, Cassandra and Miss Andra enjoyed being able to properly relax in some hot water with fancy soaps. They let Cassandra play in the water a bit. Just like Kian, they had already noticed that the baby enjoyed water a lot. As soon as he was laid in, he naturally tried to paddle and splash with his feet, wiggling around. Kian was swimming around them in the bathtub too. The dragon's wings were still not fully developed, but it could make short little flights and jump out of the water before diving again. Once they were done bathing, the sisters were given some large bathrobes. They noticed someone had even gone to purchase new diapers for the baby. The dragon was a bit harder to persuade out of the bath, though. Cassandra attempted to call Kian out many times, her pleas falling uselessly on deaf ears. Eventually, Miss Andra had to wrestle the mischievous baby dragon out. It was having too much fun making her chase it around, until she was finally able to grab the silver tail. "Come, while you were bathing we got some dinner ready for you," said Yozora. "I imagine you have much to tell us." Indeed, a large table had been prepared with food, making them immediately hungry despite their current fatigue. Miss Andra almost jumped to get a steamed bun. Meanwhile, Cassandra carefully laid Cassandra down in a little basket containing a blanket that the young servant girl Myra had prepared for him. As soon as he was on his back, the baby yawned, and Kian jumped next to him to curl up for a nap, too. "So," said Yozora. "I'm very confused, Cassandra. Last time we saw you was at the slave market, and after that we barely heard anything. I'm sorry, things got hectic." Cassandra went on to explain everything that had happened to her since the last time she had come here to free the slaves, and Sheren had killed her previous mistress. It was a lot from when she had left the palace, and Miss Andra helped her fill some blanks as well. Both sisters were also trying to eat while talking, as the sight of cooked food made them realize just how hungry they really were. With all the stress, Cassandra hadn't realized how tired she felt, either. Once she was done, both for explanations and eating, she turned to Yozora, worried. "What about the letter?" "Oh, right. Give me a minute." She left and came back, handing to Cassandra the letter she had mentioned earlier. "I didn't open it, as it was addressed to you. Just like I said, this letter arrived the next morning after that man had come by, delivered by a messenger bird. The previous man warned us we'd better welcome you properly, and also make sure you stay safe." Miss Andra and Cassandra exchanged a glance. "Definitely one of Lady Karin's spies," said Miss Andra. "Probably," agreed her older sister, opening the letter right away. Cassandra read the lines so fast that she had to go over a second time before handing them to Miss Andra. In this letter, Evan was true to himself, hoping Cassandra was all right as well as giving her a detailed report on the situation in the Northern Army camp. He wrote how he had persuaded Sherian to bring him back with her to the Diamond Castle, and described their current situation up to the time he had sent this letter, which was written and sent in a hurry. She let out a sigh of relief, though she wished it contained some better news. "So, Lady Sherian is at least back at the Diamond Palace with Prince Anur," reiterated Miss Andra. "However, they still had no news of my lord when that letter was sent. What is going on?" Cassandra couldn't hide how worried she was for Sheren. She was indeed happy about Sherian's return to the Diamond Palace, thankful for Lady Sheren to have an extra ally by her side. The mother-daughter duo was so strong, they had actually chased away the second prince. She didn't care much about Phaedra's fate, but Cassandra was worried to know where that treacherous brother of hers had gone. Did he follow the fake leads to the north? They hadn't heard anything about the second prince's army on the way here, but this could have been because moving his army was a slow process. Maybe he was only a couple of days behind. Miss Andra gently put a hand on her older sister's leg, feeling her worry. She then turned to Yazora. How is the situation here? We heard some bad rumors about the Emperor on our way here. The middle-aged woman sighed and nodded, grabbing one layer of her dress with a sour expression. I fear it is all true. The rumors have been all over the streets for a couple of days now. The old emperor has become very sick. We don't know what's going on in the palace, the security was increased so suddenly and there was a big ruckus. They tried to prevent people from coming in or out, which made people even more suspicious. Some ministers and scholars were even executed publicly. People are terrified. Cassandra was livid. How could so much happen in a single week? Just because Sephir had died. Now, the emperor was supposedly near death as well, people being executed, that sounded like someone was purging. Her heart sank. What if Sheren didn't come back in time to stop his brother? She exchanged a look with Miss Andra. Her younger sister didn't look worried, but angry. That rat face probably put his plan in motion as soon as your man was sent to war, Miss Andra said. What a snake! So no one has been able to enter the palace since then, asked Cassandra. What about the fourth and fifth princes? I haven't heard anything about those two. Cassandra bit her lower lip. That meant the fifth prince Lephis and fourth prince Ophius were probably still inside the imperial palace. The problem was, she had no idea if they would side with their second brother or Sheren. Cassandra had only met the two of them very briefly. Lephis didn't give her a good impression at all, and she couldn't even remember seeing Ophius aside from his presence during the Red Moon Festival. He was known to be very secretive and avoided his father's banquets almost as much as Sheren and Sherian. Could he be a potential ally? She couldn't approach either of them without being sure. What about the battlefront? She asked, her throat a bit tight. Tell me you have news. Yazora seemed to hesitate for a few seconds and nodded. I do, but it is not much better. The last thing we heard came from some soldiers, yesterday. Ethan went to buy some groceries and heard them. Apparently, they said the war god was ambushed in the last city, and the fight isn't going too well. I honestly don't know if that's true, but the Eastern Empire had dragons. Cassandra was shocked. Dragons? How could the Eastern Empire have dragons when none of their people had dragon blood? Were those dragons captured? Or conveniently given to them by a certain prince? Cassandra tried to remember. Vrihan has 2 sons, but he wouldn't send his own sons' dragons to war, she muttered. Maybe he took some of his brothers, said Miss Andra. Didn't the first prince have sons, too? Sephir had 1 son, and other than Vrihan's sons, I think the 5th prince Lephis had sons as well. Oh God, the first prince's concubines, and their children. Cassandra had almost completely forgotten about those two. What had happened to them after Sephir's death? She clearly remembered the two concubines who had tried to befriend her, back at the imperial palace. Sheren had stated those women and their children would be in danger as soon as their lord died. What had Sheren done with them, and with the children? Would he use his nephew's dragon? She remembered those women, Barasa and Kiara, when they had come to her. Cassandra hadn't thought too much about it since then. She hoped they were fine. Did they manage to leave the imperial palace? Maybe they were fine for now, as the old emperor was still alive. I hope they are doing all right. You said the man brought gold and food. Did he say anything else? No. He was very discreet, probably a spy. It made sense. Cassandra wished Lady Sheren had left more information. At least she had found a way to provide them some assistance. Lady Sheren probably didn't want you to move from here until they arrived, said Miss Andra. Without the third prince, you're a target for them. Especially with those two. She was pointing at Cashin and Kian, both peacefully sleeping already. Cassandra sighed. The last thing she wanted to do was put her baby and his dragon in any danger. This house was probably safe for now, but the word that she was hiding in the capital would definitely spread around now that Kian had been spotted at the gate. Now more than ever, she couldn't stop worrying about everything going on. The concubines and their children, and the old emperor. The battlefront, as well. What was that story about dragons? This was supposed to be an easy victory, but now, her dear war god could really be in trouble. Sherian will probably go to help him if she's gone back to the Diamond Palace, said Cassandra. However, I think this sounds too much like a giant trap. Definitely, sighed her sister. I told you from the beginning. What do we do though? We should stay still until they arrive, right? Cassandra hesitated a bit. Could she stay put, though? Time was against them. If that letter had arrived 2 days ago through a bird. If everything Evan had said was right, and Sherian had to go help her brother on the battlefront before they could come back here, her prince most likely wouldn't be able to return to the capital for at least a couple more days. That was only an optimistic estimate, too. Meanwhile, his father was dying in the imperial palace, only a few paces away from Cassandra. She bit her lip, making Miss Andra frown. Oh, no, Hainu. This might be our only chance to save the emperor, she said. Or our one chance to get killed. Why would you go to the imperial palace when that would be the obvious place we could get ourselves killed? The second prince isn't in the capital at the moment, right? Asked Cassandra, turning to Azora. No. See? Miss Andra, if the emperor dies, we will be in much more trouble than we are now. We are losing time, the old emperor could die any minute from whatever they did to him. Yes, and maybe that old man is already dead and done for, Cassandra. In any case, I'm pretty sure Lady Sheren didn't want you to go there and expose yourself. They freaking closed the imperial palace for a reason, they don't want you in. Maybe we can find a way around that, whispered Cassandra. Miss Andra was about to retort something, but before she did, Azora raised her hands, putting an end to their dispute. Ladies, I think you are both very tired and in need of some decent sleep. So, even if you want to come up with a plan, I suggest you wait until tomorrow. Join our Facebook and WhatsApp group for more updates, link is given in description. Rest audiobook will be continued in next episode.